I've seen egos destroy businesses, lifestyles, families.
I had somebody from California tell me, in Iowa, your money's in the bank. In California, we drive it and wear it. Everybody was in Mercedes and Lexus. I just thought they were rich, so the perception worked, but they had no money. They were strapped. You climb that cliff in business all the way up, and you look back, and you believe that nobody helped you along the way. The next step is complete failure. You're gonna fall like a rock.
Welcome to the Invest Your Time Wisely podcast. I'm Sean Kirby, and I'm joined with my dad, Mr. Mike Kirby. He was on the last episode, and today we're going to talk about how egos are expensive, not only in life, in family, but in business. So the one big idea is I've seen egos destroy businesses, lifestyles, families, and one of the things that I always have to remind myself, especially in today's world, is in this comparison internet age that is so easy to get caught up in your kind of like the world has defined it's yourself, as opposed to one of the things we talked about last episode is putting people first. So, Dad, I want you to kind of tell some stories and kind of give a little bit of background about how you've seen this play out, because you've seen a lot more than I have.
Well, I think you first have to start with what is ego. And the best definition I have ever heard of it is edging God out. And you can take that all the way back to Genesis in original sin, when the serpent came to Adam and Eve and said, if you'll just eat from this tree of knowledge, you will be just like God. That's why he doesn't want you to do this. And if you take that all the way to the human experience today, there's lots of things that can cause a person's ego, edging God out, to become prevalent in their life. And to me, the very first thing is probably an inferiority complex. Not one that's so prevalent that everybody goes, oh, wow, that person really is, edging God out. But it's everything is directing them toward being, you're always the best. Look at what you succeeded. You've achieved so much. We watched this in sports when we were throwing baseballs and footballs. If the kid's whole life, genetically, he was above everybody, they had a certain skill or a talent, and they were always told, you are the best. Now you fast forward that from Little League into maybe junior high school, and then into high school, and into college, and into pros. You can tell very quickly which individual shows up on the field with an ego. And generally, they're very fragile people. They are hurt by words. They're hurt by other people saying, you could always be better. Well, I am the best. Mm-hmm. They don't allow people to critique or coach. It's an attitude as much as anything. And so from an ego perspective, how does that affect you? Well, if the ultimate job in business is to attract and keep good people, and the goal is to put other people first, the bigger your ego, the harder that is. And then the victim mentality sets in. Well, that didn't happen because I'm a victim. That didn't happen because it's an excuse. It's always other people's fault. So to me, an ego is one of the most dangerous things that we have as human beings. Now, we all have the ability to go, boy, I did pretty well at that. But the difference is being able to differentiate that I put the work in. I really worked hard, and that happened. That actually worked. Or I didn't have to work, but it still happened, so it must be just because of me. Mm-hmm. And the challenge I would give everybody is, what if you were writing a letter to somebody, and you go, hey, I think this, and I believe this, and I know this, and so forth. And what if you change the I, the first person pronoun, to we? We did this. We know this. We achieved this. Well, the letter takes on a completely different dynamic. It's inclusive. It allows people to feel part of the success. So when an ego shows up, it's very difficult for them to share the success. It's all about me. And if you think of a cliff, You climb that cliff in business all the way up. Hard things, hard things, hard things, but you reach what you think is the pinnacle. And you look back and you believe that nobody helped you along the way. The next step is complete failure. You're going to fall like a rock. And then you're going to be humbled. And if you're smart enough to realize and reflect, you're going to look back and say, now's the time to use the first person pronoun. It was my fault. I didn't put other people first. How could I have done this differently or better? And each time in the world that you and I live in, as long as we stay grounded in God, put Him first, approach Him with humility, with teach me, Lord, show me what I should be doing. If I'm headed down the wrong path, through prayer, through scripture, through study, you're going to show me that I'm just doing this wrong. I have found personally that if I put everybody else first in a servant leadership position, then my job is to help you be better, whether you're an employee, a client, just a person on the sidewalk, that my life is more fulfilled and gratifying than if I went, well, I need to cut in front of you, whether that's cut in front of you at work or I deserve that promotion or this. Now, what can I do better? Sometimes the environment that you're in is just not going to allow you to be the servant leader that you should be, or just the servant that you should be, because everybody's on this ladder trying to cutthroat. Nobody likes an environment where everybody's trying to backbite and do that sort of thing. Take a moment, humble yourself and say, what can I do to help you? You look like you're having a bad day. How can I help? You'll change your world. Your attitude will change. And all of a sudden, people open up to you unlike they ever have, whether it's a client, whether it's an employee, or just somebody on the sidewalk.
Yeah, we were this last service at Traders. Pastor Aaron kind of talked about his big piece was the not enough. That's insecurity, right? What's the thing that's holding you back from either your relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse, your kids, at work, right? What's holding you back? And just surrender that. So they did. They gave everybody a pen and a piece of paper, and everyone would write down, their insecurity, what they don't feel like enough at, right? And then at the end, you take it up to the altar and you leave it before God and come back and you worship, that sort of piece. One of the statements you've always said, and I think that this is kind of the same idea, is leave your ego at the door, right? Leave your ego at the altar. Leave that insecurity where it needs to be and surrender yourself to, work, play, that sort of thing. Where have you seen egos get expensive, going even back to your corporate days? What have you seen that really somebody was on the right path and then they let them, they were tripping over themselves as opposed to...
We'll go back to the word insecurity.
Yeah.
Because that generally manifests itself in behavior. And whether that's, I'm so insecure that I've got to find relief somewhere, whether that's in an extramarital affair, whether that's in alcohol, drugs, whether that's in what I would say the petty things such as gossip, things that are conniving. And so if you think about insecurities, how do we remedy those? Well, I want you to think about a tree. So a tree has two ways it grows. And it grows first gravitonic. So the very first thing that happens is that seed falls from the tree, it sinks into the soil, and the taproot starts. Well, if you take that from a human perspective, my taproot has got to be based on study, faith, commitment, goals. That's my taproot. And from there, it starts to spread out. And then all of a sudden, a sprout comes up. That's what's called phototonic. So a tree is going to grow gravitonic and phototonic. And the deeper my taproot, the more study, the more commitment, the more places I put my energy in a positive way toward my goals, now my tree is going to grow. Phototonically, it's going to grow as high as it possibly can to reach the sun. And then it's going to spread out. You think about business, it works exactly the same way. I've got to have, first of all, a skill set that somebody wants to pay me for. I have to have an education or an ability to provide something that people are willing to pay for. And that root keeps going deeper and deeper as I grow. And then my business continues to grow higher. So from an ego perspective, what I see people really falling short of is the fact their taproot is too shallow. They haven't spent enough time to have the self-confidence. Self-confidence is different than ego. So if you wrap self-confidence with humility, that I've got more I've got to do, I've got more I have to learn. If I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in the wrong room type mentality. I'm willing to listen more than talk. When I do talk, it's generally going to be a question. Tell me more about that. Now, if they ask me a question, then I will give whatever advice I may have or opinion I may have. But my taproot has to continue to go down. If you figure the average person is going to live maybe 85 years, that's roughly 744,000 hours. So how are my hours being spent? Now you figure for the first, let's say, 10 years of your life, you're just being fed, watered, and clothed, right? You are getting the basics of how to learn, but then from about 10 to 18, you're involved in things, you're around other people, you're starting to socialize. And you can already by that age see how the parents are telling those kids to act. Some parents don't tell them how to act at all. Some parents are guiding them. Some parents are just letting them be feral. And you can tell the difference. Ego and victimhood show up even those early ages. So I've got to make sure, even with my new clients, that I've listened to them, my young children, I've listened to them, but I've guided them along the way. That it ain't all about you. You've heard me talk about birthday parties when 100 people show up to a 1-year-old birthday party. I get it. They're all grandkids and so forth. But I also go, that kid thinks the world revolves around them. And by the time they're 14 years old, they're lucky to get a cake on the kitchen table. They're going, what happened? I like the idea of allowing people to grow humility, but get that taproot deep. And you've got to decide as a parent, as a business owner, how deep that root needs to go. Constantly study, constantly go to industry, different seminars. Things are going to grow you deeper so that when you're able to provide services for your clients or your customers, they're looking at you going, boy, I'm paying because your taproot is deeper than mine. As far as the corporate world is concerned, boy, just anything you can imagine. Individuals with insecurities, individual says, time, I'm more seniority than you. I'm more this than you. Well, but if you reached the ceiling because you didn't take your taproot any deeper, well, that's as high as you're going to grow. You and I are bird hunters. And if you're out wild bird hunting, pheasant, quail, a pheasant's going to fly, it'll fly 50 feet in the air. But if it is a pen-raised bird and it was raised in a 10-foot pen, it will never fly over that 10 feet. So it's all about your environment. And if your ego is stuck in this environment because it makes you feel better, but you're not growing, then you better get out of that environment. And the only way you can is humble yourself. I don't know. If the one thing an education gives you is it gives you the confidence to say, I don't know. I don't know. It's probably my favorite thing to say today. And because there is a lot of stuff, especially in technology, I don't know. Now, there are some things my taproot doesn't want to know. If somebody says to me, hey, how does this computer work? I don't know, and I don't care to know. What I care is, does it work? And if it doesn't, I'm either going to get a new computer or somebody's going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right?
100%. So as an employer who, you preach that leave your ego at the door, talk about some of those things that put people in a bad position when it comes to ego purchases. Like, we work with clients of all sizes and shapes, right? People who are new to business, people who've been doing it for a long time. I've seen it. I've done it. I've done the ego purchases in the past. It's a lot harder now with the responsibility of 4 kids to go out and do anything for myself. The first thing that I buy is diapers and food and shelter, the
Sure.
main things that you offered to me when I was 10 years old. I did buy a sauna recently. I'm going to put that as chapter 3 of the book, Health is Wealth. It I just wanted a better sauna. So that was a bit of an ego purchase. But what are like the big pitfalls that you've seen, right, when it comes to ego purchases or even maybe lifestyles?
Oh, it's the same old thing. Keeping up with the Joneses is probably the easiest way to say it. The perception of what car I drive, what clothes I wear, what's my house look like, what school do my kids go to. It's funny because I mentioned in the previous episode I worked in California. Now, as a Midwest kid, we grew up in a pretty humble beginnings. And it's one of those things that as we were growing up is if you don't have the money to buy it, you don't buy it. And when I flew to California, and this is probably 3 or 4 months into the responsibility, I had somebody from California tell me, and at the time we lived in Iowa, they said, well, you know the difference between Iowa and California? And I said, no. I said, besides the weather. And they said, well, in Iowa, your money's in the bank. In California, we drive it and wear it. And it really struck me because everybody was in Mercedes and Lexus back then, which were the cars to have. I just thought they were rich. So the perception worked, but they had no money. They were strapped. So I used to give this talk where if you could visualize a scale, and I draw it on the whiteboard, and on one side I put contribution, on the other side I'd put rewards. And I would ask people, are you willing to make the contribution, and I go back to our goal planning list, to get the rewards? So the more contributions I make, the more chances of these rewards happening. Now, if I take the rewards before I make the contribution, I would always write in the middle of that debt. So I'm willing to take the reward way before I'm able to make the contribution. Well, that debt means that I just simply deserve, ego-wise, the reward just on the promise that I'm going to make the contribution. Well, if you make that debt big enough, there's not enough hours in the days to make those contributions. And depending upon what you do, you may work your tail off, but you don't get paid enough for all the rewards you took before you made the contributions anyway. So that's when people start to fail, is I'm going to show my success through product, through lifestyle or whatever, before I've ever made the contribution. And unfortunately, in the United States today, that culture has been around for 30 years, probably in the 80s, as you think, of course, for you two, this is way before you. But in the 80s, we had just come out of this huge recession in the 70s. And then there was this boom in the 80s. And everybody, this is when Pretty Woman came out, BMWs, Lotus, all this stuff. And everybody wanted that perception, including myself. I had pictures of Porsches. I had pictures of all these cars that I wanted. Fortunately for me, interest rates were about 18%, and I made $9 an hour, and they weren't going to loan me the money for a Porsche, or I would have tried to take that reward. Yeah. So emotionally, and I would say psychologically, I thought that was the pinnacle of success. So my ego back then was, that's what it is. It's material things. I need to show people how well I've done. 62 years later, I look at things and go, I really don't care anymore. I mean, I wear jeans and tennis shoes most every day. It used to be Wranglers and boots, but I'm too old for that. They don't bend like they used to. But that's the difference. As young people, I need to show other people my success. That's the beginning of the ego. And I get it. I've been there.
Yeah, and as a younger person in today's world, I grew up in that social media era. I remember going to the book fair, and now that I've got a kid that goes to the book fair, and you hand them $20 and you tell them, don't buy any posters, just buy books at the book fair. But I remember you give me, I don't know if it was $20 or not, but I would buy the Lamborghini poster every single time, and it'd hang in my room. And still, if you go to my Facebook Marketplace, I'm still looking for a 1982 Porsche 911 with a whale tail. Same one you had when we were kids, because it's not a pinnacle of success, but what an amazing, if it, right price, right place, it might all work out. But it's hard to get yourself back out of that mindset. So funny story is, last year, so we obviously went through this big house transition in 2023 to 2024. And there are a couple decisions you make along the way. We didn't make a lot of ego decisions. You made a lot of decisions you had to make at the time, right? And it put us in a tight spot for where we were. But last summer we went to somebody else's pool after church, and I was like, "This is a nice pool. You know what we need is a pool case." So we get home, and I called Marco. I was like, "Hey, fast math me. Like, I don't know, like if this is a dream where I want it to be a goal and the plans behind it." And then Marco comes back and he goes, "Well, tell me what you want." So I send him all the details, and he comes back. He goes, "Well, I can do it." He gives me a price. And in my head, I was expecting a much larger price. So I'm like, "I'm sure I could scrape some pennies together. I make this work." I go, "Casey, you think we could do pull this?" She goes, "You can't do. What are you doing?" And she was funny enough because she even brought the goal list back out on paper. And she goes, "Sean, it's not on the goal list." I was like, "All right." Well, then Marco goes, "Well, I can get it in by August, same year." I go, "Well, that's not what I was like, this is 2027, like 2028. I'm looking further." And then 2 nights later, my barn burnt to the ground during a fireworks incident. As an insurance agent, I didn't do it on purpose. It was a complete freak accident. I think it was my attorney brother-in-law, Adam, if you're listening. And that was me going back to Case and saying, "All right, sign from God. We're not doing it." I got a little over my skis. That was my ego got in my head of, yeah, you can do a pool. You can be the house with a pool.
But
pool guy.
There is a difference, going back to the beginning of this, edging God out, wanting material things. God wants us to have a wonderful life as long as we put him first.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're going to go on your knees and say, "God, should I have a pool?" And he's going to go, "Yeah, Sean, you need one." But in the macro part of the world, there's going to be times that you do things personally that you would never do in the business, right? So the rule we have in business is when it costs us not to have something, we better have it. An example, we're overwhelmed. We need another person. Oh, we're missing this piece of equipment to do the job better. Personal stuff, you just have to be very careful from an ego perspective that this doesn't get out of control. Otherwise, the business is going to hurt because you can't make enough money in the business to pay for all this ego stuff you bought personally. Mm-hmm. So time is one of those things. Let's go back to time. So one of the things that I watched when I graduated from school and was ready to move into my first house is I was still very open to hand-me-down furniture, anything that I could get, whether it was Salvation Army or old relative, that we could fill the house with. What I watch today is kids don't do that. And they certainly don't want an old bed from somebody. They don't want, an antique piece of furniture. They want to go to IKEA where they buy crap. But it's one of those, our perception has to be everything is new.
Yeah.
And that's ego to me, 100%. Absolutely. That you go, well, wait a minute. You can't afford this. You can barely afford your rent. And now you're going to put new furniture in it. So to me, it's just part of the culture. Social media doesn't help it. All this onslaught of advertising that comes at you, 90 days, same as cash. You don't have to pay for a year. I mean, the whole system is geared toward what? The ego. You can have it. You can pay me later. I was in Newcastle yesterday and at the laundromat, and I pulled out and I saw a truck in front of me, and they park on both sides of the road, so I had to pull over. And it was one of those repo trucks picking up somebody's Ranger boat. And I thought, well, that's a repo. Somebody got over their skis and went, yeah, I'll sign on the dotted line. The sales guy doesn't care because the sales guy sends it to a finance company, so they're on the hook. He got his commission.
Yep.
So checking the ego at the door allows you to do a couple things. The most important thing it does is give you peace. When I care more about what I think about me than what I care about other people, then that's a problem. What I want to make sure I do is care more about other people. When I care more about them, family, kids, the employees and so forth, I don't have a choice but keep my ego in check. I don't have a choice. Your ego gets out of whack, Casey will put you right back in place. Absolutely. And vice versa.
Yeah.
That's the balance. It's the symbiotic relationship that allows you both to go, hey, I'm just me. And she'll look at you and say, but that's where the goal planning sheet comes out. She did the right thing. Pull the goal planning sheet out. Hey, it's not on here.
She did my move to me. It was crazy.
Well, you taught her well. So in that, let's go back to the ego part. What allows people to get there? Well, if it's insecurity, and going back to our tree, then my taproot's not deep enough. And how do I get that to where I'm doing my research, my study, my Bible study, the things that I do on a daily basis, taking care of myself physically. Yeah, I benefit from that. I'm putting the work in, but I'm really doing that for the people around me. I'm no good to the office if I'm sick. I'm no good to the office if I'm ego-driven and I'm saying you're all doing this for me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't work.
Hands and feet. One of the things that I think a lot of business owners get stuck with ego also is like the power of delegation. So you and I were listening to the first episode on the way in, and I talked about one of your mantras is do it, ditch it, or delegate it. Even like it's quicker if I do this. I'm going to do it better than, the new hire, that sort of piece. Speak to what delegation does from a ownership ego standpoint, and then where you see like it crumble for some small business owners that maybe just can't get past that plateau line because of their ego. And it's not even like, on purpose.
Yeah, it depends on what the task is, right? Because when I was 12 years old in the fall, if the grain leg stopped and we had a pile of corn that was 10 feet around and 6 foot tall, basically that wasn't ego and nobody had to train me. Terry Moore would just hand me a shovel and say, hey, you need to shovel that corn into the hopper. There wasn't a lot of training. Goal was to move the corn from there to there. But if you take our industry or what we do for a living, there are some very technical things. I can only delegate if the individual's taproot is deep enough to be able to do it. Now, it may be a skill set they're not familiar with, but it's going to take their taproot deeper by doing that. But I have to coach them. I can't just delegate it to them and just hope they figure it out, because it's not them or me they're doing it for. They're doing it for the client. Mm-hmm. And I can't risk losing the client relationship because I didn't train the person to do it. Now, if I'm going to train them, I'm going to do it through systems. Those systems are transferable from me to you, and they're inspectable from me to you. So if I'm going to delegate, I must give them a track to run on, one that I can come back and see how they're doing, make sure they feel completely comfortable in asking questions. And then I'm measuring their capacity. Do they have a skill set that allows them to learn this? Some people aren't good with numbers. We have to be good with numbers. If they're not good with numbers, doesn't make them a bad person, but they're either going to do some self-work on getting better with numbers, or I've got them on the wrong seat of the bus. Because I can't spend hours upon hours hoping they get it. I need to be able to instruct, have the capacity to learn it, and then be able to have the confidence that if I give them the same task again, I don't have to train them again.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I see a lot are you're not into a lot of partnerships personally. You have a few like great partnerships, great relationships. Partnerships, people who are starting a fresh business, personalities, egos, that sort of piece. Where do you see like the biggest struggle when it comes to partnerships and where ego kind of jumps in?
Well, all right. So in a partnership, everything starts out with a great idea. Oh, we're going to do this. And let's just say it's a restaurant. All right. You're good at this. I'm good at this. We're going to start a restaurant. But let's say you're both really good at marketing, but nobody knows how to cook. It's not going to work. Or you say, well, I'm going to put some money in. That's my part of the partnership. And I'm just going to show up occasionally to help. It's not long before the person who is now tasked with all the labor is going, I'm doing way more than you are. Mm-hmm. And this person goes, but you couldn't do it without the money. They're both correct. That's where in a partnership, an operating agreement has to be up front that says, here's the task that your responsibility, here's the task of my responsibility. If you don't have that and you're just winging it, it's destined to fail. And we also have to remember that most individuals have other individuals that they're responsible to, a spouse. So this person, partner one, may have a clear understanding what his role is or her role is. Partner two has that same thing, but partner three and partner four don't. So the pressure comes in, we're not getting anything out of this, or you're doing all the work and they're not. Partnerships are incredibly difficult. But if everybody has it in writing, here's what my role is, here's what your role is, it starts to mitigate some of the friction.
It's kind of that taproot, right? So I've gotten better about advising it to more and more clients just because of seeing enough of them go sideways, right? It's the marriage certificate. It's the document Casey brought back out and put in front of me and said, this is not what we discussed originally. I see partnerships tend to fail when there is frustration, but it's not, the piece of paper never comes back out, right? It's just that deep-seated, almost like, I wouldn't even call it disdain, but like just those frustrations begin to bubble and without going.
And sometimes, going back to our topic here, sometimes it is ego.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just miscommunication or poor communication. So we don't want to get off into, I don't think, a lot of business type depth here, but keeping it on the ego side, as long as people can check their ego at the door and then realize that whatever partnership, call it marriage, I'm good at this and you're good at this, and together we're better, right? I'm better when I'm with you type thing.
Yep.
As long as that is open and people have dialogue, and as long as people are going, hey, remember these goals we wrote down? That's what we're working toward, right? Your taproot does this, my taproot does this. Boom, we're going to succeed.
Yeah.
And then you have to last. It's no different than what we've talked about before. You just have to make it last.
Yeah, I think the best lesson I got was, your humility compounds faster than your ego. So like, let's just use marriage, because I think partnerships really are just a marriage. There's just money in between, same financial struggles, is when you wake up every day worried about how you're going to make the other person's life better, right? That you have the humility to go make a pot of coffee, even if you don't drink coffee, right? If you have the humility to go start the shower because you know that, they're coming up next. Like that humility is what really edges that forward. It's so much easier for that ego to drift further and further behind if you can just serve first.
Serve. There's the word. As long as I'm serving first, everything tends to take care of itself. Now, there are people who would take advantage of that. So that's where the toughest word in business, no. I mean, it is truly tough to tell people no. But if people are sucking your energy, pulling you off track, pulling your goals way out of whack, sometimes you got to look at them and say, it's time for me to say no.
Yeah.
But
not you,
with
me.
dignity,
yeah.
Say it just doesn't work. We tried it, just didn't work.
Well, and I think that goes back to the investment in the relationship in the first place, right? Like one of the things you've always said is you have to make daily deposits, right? If you expect a withdrawal, right, you can't turn into an ATM or a vending machine that, works for free. You have to start to make those daily deposits. And at the end of the day, I used to struggle with this with friendships, right? Like I have wonderful friends, right? And, as I've gotten older, it's harder to make friends as you get older, right? Everybody's living 1,000 miles an hour, especially when you have kids, right? And everybody's focused on one thing. And it doesn't matter. They're focused on themselves, right? We are, we are apes, right? We are worried about survival. And when you make those deposits, part of you, that ego gets in the back of your head and you get jaded about, well, I do this all the time. I text first. I call, you know what I mean? In being able to just say, I serve that person because I love that person and I hope they're doing well, and have no expectation of the receivement side, I think that is such a freeing, let's call it the word surrender, right?
Yeah, but it absolutely. But I also believe it's impossible to give more than you get. You cannot give and give and give and not get something.
Yep.
Now, what I just heard you say is your ego and your humility allows you to have no expectation, which is the most precious way to give. I have no expectation of anything back. And from the receiver perspective, that is the greatest gift. Boy, they didn't want anything. That's over the years, and you've called me out on it. Dad, you give too much free advice. And I go, no, it's not free advice. This is as much for me as it is for them. My job is to help them get where they want to go. If they choose to use us, they will. And hopefully the ones that appreciate what we did do come back. But I'm not afraid to sit down with somebody for an hour. You've watched me. And I get nothing out of it financially, but emotionally and intellectually, yeah, I'm here to help. Don't care. But I'm not in the survival stage anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So going back to invest your time wisely. If I invest my time wisely in helping enough people get where they want to go, I'll always be where I want to be. Always.
And I think that's, I think that's where I kind of get to where wealth isn't all about looking important. It's about the relationships you build. It's about, I guess, the way that you carry yourself. And I think that to anyone who's listening to this, if this responds well, or if this resonates to you, I think more than anything, it's the original Mikeism is you can't give more than you get. And if you serve first, it's easy to leave the ego at the door.
Yeah, I'm not going to edge God out. And whenever I hear the word ego, that's immediately what comes to my brain. I'm not edging God out for you. I'm not edging God out for me. I'm not going to edge God out for anything. So if I put him first, which biblically says, serve, love thy neighbor as thyself. And if you live by that, your ego's not going to show up. You may get your feelings hurt occasionally. You may get some of that, but you're going to get over it. They maybe were having a bad day. You never know.
Well, Dad, I appreciate your time today. I think that was a great lesson that we displayed today. I think if you guys resonated with that, I think that that's a great way to invest your time wisely.